The man who survived monsters, escaped a dragon, and sailed through rocks that wanted to crush him to powder ended up being killed by a piece of wood falling on his head. That is not a joke. That is how the story ends. And if you sit with that for a moment, it starts to feel less like a punchline and more like the whole point. The story of Jason and the Argonauts is one of the oldest adventure stories in the Western world. It was circulating long before it was ever written down, probably passed around campfires for centuries before the poet Apollonius of Rhodes committed it to the page in the 3rd century BC. It predates Alexander the Great. It predates most of what we think of as classical Greece. And yet, it is not a story about ancient problems. It is a story about a very specific and very modern type of person, the kind who is brilliant at getting what he wants and catastrophically bad at understanding what it costs. Let us start at the beginning, which in true Greek fashion involves a prophecy, a stolen throne, and a man in sandals. Jason was the son of Ason, the rightful king of Iolcos, a city in Thessaly. When Jason was still an infant, his uncle Peleus seized the throne. To protect the boy, his family sent him into the mountains to be raised by Chiron, the centaur, who was essentially ancient Greece's most prestigious boarding school for future heroes. Heracles went there. Achilles went there. Chiron's curriculum included medicine, music, hunting, and apparently a lot of general excellence. Years later, a young Jason came down from the mountain to reclaim his inheritance. He crossed a flooded river and lost one of his sandals in the current, arriving at Iolcos with one bare foot. This mattered because an oracle had warned Peleus to watch out for a man wearing only one sandal. When Peleus saw Jason limping into his court, he did not panic visibly. Instead, he smiled, offered his nephew wine, and said he would be delighted to hand over the kingdom. All he asked was one small thing first. Would Jason mind terribly sailing to the far end of the known world to retrieve a legendary artifact that no one had ever successfully brought back? The golden fleece was the magical wool of a winged ram, hung in a sacred grove at the edge of the Black Sea in the kingdom of Colchis, guarded by a dragon that never slept. Peleus sent Jason there, fully expecting that was the last he would hear of the matter. What happened instead became a template for almost every adventure story ever told after it. Jason recruited the greatest heroes in Greece. Heracles, the strongest man alive. Orpheus, whose music was so beautiful it could stop rivers. The twins, Castor and Polydeuces. Atalanta, the fastest human being in the world and the only woman on the crew. Peleus, who would later become the father of Achilles. About 50 heroes in total, crammed onto a custom-built ship called the Argo. They called themselves the Argonauts. The crew list reads like someone tried to assemble the Avengers, but could only afford to rent one boat. They set sail from Iolcos and almost immediately found trouble. Their first stop was the island of Lemnos, inhabited entirely by women. The backstory there involves Aphrodite, a curse, an incident of mass violence, and several years of complete social chaos. The Argonauts stayed for a while. Heracles eventually lost patience and dragged everyone back to the ship. Moving on. Next they visited the friendly king Cyzicus, who threw them a party and warned them about the giants living on the other side of his island. Then a storm blew the Argo back to the same island in the middle of the night. In the dark, neither side recognized the other. The Argonauts killed a lot of people before dawn, revealed that the enemies they had been fighting were their hosts from the party. They had just killed King Cyzicus himself. They held a funeral, mourned deeply, and continued sailing toward a destination that kept trying to kill them before they even got there. Then came a prophet named Phineus. Zeus had cursed him with blindness and sent a pair of harpies, those hideous winged creatures, to steal whatever food was set out for him the moment it hit the table. The man had been slowly starving while surrounded by food. The Argonauts chased the harpies off, and in gratitude Phineus told them how to navigate the Symplegades, the clashing rocks, two enormous cliffs that had a habit of crashing together and grinding ships to splinters. He told Jason to release a dove first. If the dove made it through, the ship would too. The dove got through with just a few tail feathers lost. The Argo followed, suffering only minor damage at the stern. They were through. What is worth noticing here is the method. Jason did not overpower the clashing rocks. He did not find a weakness and exploit it. He followed the advice of someone smarter, released a bird, and paid attention to what it told him. This is how Jason operated throughout the journey. He was not the strongest Argonaut, or the fastest, or the most magical. He was the one who knew how to ask the right people for help, and then act on the answer. That is actually a rare and underrated skill, and it worked beautifully right up until the point where it did not. King Aeetes had no intention of handing over the fleece. He agreed to do it, technically, if Jason could complete 3 tasks. First, yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls with bronze hooves, gifts from the god Hephaestus. Second, use those bulls to plow a field and sow it with dragon's teeth, which would immediately grow into an army of armed warriors that Jason would then have to defeat. Third, get past the dragon that never slept. Aeetes considered this a foolproof plan. He had not accounted for his daughter Medea. Medea was a sorceress of significant power, granddaughter of Helios the sun god, and a priestess of Hecate. She was also, depending on which version of the story you prefer, either helplessly in love with Jason, thanks to divine interference from Aphrodite, or someone who made a calculated choice to help a man who could get her out of a kingdom where her future was limited. Either way, she betrayed her father, her country, and her own safety to give Jason everything he needed. She gave him an ointment that made him fireproof for a day. She told him how to defeat the warriors. Throw a stone among them, and they will turn on each other. She drugged the dragon. Jason completed all 3 tasks, grabbed the fleece, and ran. When Aeetes gave chase, Medea killed her own brother Apsyrtus and scattered his remains across the water. Her father, who loved the boy, was forced to stop and collect the pieces. By the time he resumed the pursuit, the Argo was gone. The return voyage took even longer than the outward journey, wandering through the Adriatic and the Mediterranean, stopping at Circe's island to be cleansed for the killing, passing between Scylla and Charybdis, narrowly surviving a bronze giant named Talos, who defended the island of Crete by hurling boulders at ships. Medea handled Talos too. She found the single vein of ichor, the divine fluid that ran through his body, and found a way to unseal it. He bled out. They sailed on. They made it home. Then things got worse. Peleus had not died of suspense while Jason was away. He was still king, still holding the throne, and he had absolutely no intention of honoring the deal. So Medea stepped in again. She demonstrated to Peleus' own daughters that she could restore a creature's youth by cutting an old ram to pieces, dropping it in a cauldron with certain herbs, and pulling out a lamb. The daughters, desperate to save their aging father, did exactly what Medea told them to do. This time Medea did not add the herbs. Peleus did not come back out of the cauldron. Jason had his revenge. He also now had a murder charge. He and Medea fled to Corinth. Here is where the story pivots, and where it gets genuinely uncomfortable to watch. In Corinth, Jason and Medea settled down, built a life, had 2 sons. They were there for years. And then Jason decided he wanted to marry Glauce, the daughter of the Corinthian king. The rationale he offered Medea was essentially that this was a practical arrangement, a political upgrade, and that she should understand. He told her she should be grateful for everything he had given her. Medea had given up her family, her homeland, her brother. She had committed crimes she could never take back. She had made all of it possible. Jason's response to this was to tell her that actually she should be thanking Aphrodite, because the goddess was the one who made Medea love him. Therefore, by Jason's logic, he owed her nothing. Euripides wrote a play about what happened next, and it is still performed today. 2,500 years later, because the situation he described remains entirely recognizable. A person who sacrificed everything to help someone else, who was then discarded the moment a better opportunity appeared. The rage of that is not ancient. It is Tuesday. Medea sent Glauce a beautiful dress and a golden crown as a wedding gift. Both were soaked in poison. The princess put them on and died. Her father Creon died trying to hold his daughter as she burned. And then Medea killed her own sons, the 2 children she had with Jason, because she understood that the one thing she could not take from Jason with a sword, she could take from him this way. She wanted to destroy not just his present, but his future. Every version of his life that was still possible. She escaped in a chariot pulled by dragons, sent by her grandfather the sun god, and fled to Athens. She did not look back. Jason was left standing alone in Corinth with nothing. No throne. No wife, no children. No Hera, who had sponsored the whole expedition, but lost interest once Medea had served her purpose in destroying Peleus. The goddess had moved on. So had everyone else. He spent his final years as a broken man, living beside the beached and rotting hull of the Argo. The ship that had made him famous had been hauled out of the water and left to decay. According to the myth, Jason used to sit beneath it, leaning against the wood, probably doing what people do when everything has gone wrong, which is replay all the moments when a different choice was still possible. One day, a rotting beam from the prow fell on him. Not in battle, not at sea, not at the hands of a monster. A piece of his own ship, the thing that represented every great thing he had ever done, fell and killed him. Here's the thing worth carrying out of this story. Jason was genuinely gifted. He assembled the greatest crew in the ancient world. He navigated situations that were designed to be unsurvivable. He got the fleece. He won. And then, when there were no more monsters to outsmart, no more obstacles to root around, no more external challenges requiring ingenuity and leadership, he turned inward and made every possible wrong choice. He mistook loyalty for a resource he could use and discard. He confused the people who helped him with the luck he believed was simply his by right. The Greeks were interested in a specific kind of failure, the kind that does not come from weakness, but from a flaw in the way someone understands the world. Jason's flaw was not cowardice or stupidity. It was entitlement so deep he could not see it. He genuinely believed that his goals were reasonable, his decisions logical, his treatment of Medea fair. That is what makes him so recognizable. He is not a villain twirling a mustache. He is someone who spent his whole life succeeding and concluded from that evidence that he deserved to. The Argo became a constellation after his death. The Greeks put his ship in the sky and left him in the dirt beneath it. That particular detail feels like the myth knew exactly what it was doing.